on shared. And again, just a thumbs up, or can I just get a yes that you see my screen that says earning a commission residential listing agreement?
Yes, I can see it. Simon.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, team. I appreciate it. And I understand that in presentations, you often get calls as well. Please make sure that you mute yourself for the integrity of the presentation to, just be respectful for your colleagues as well, so they can get the value of the presentation. I hear some people in the background already, so I'm gonna mute the person.
Simon, you're muted.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can hear
Yes.
you now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm over here talking about people putting themselves on mute and I mute myself. How funny is that, right? So again, let's go ahead and dive deep into earning a commission in the process as a licensed real estate agent representing the seller. So what I want to talk to you is, when is it considered a earned commission when representing a seller? Let's just say that we go through the motions, right? The motions of, you list the property, congratulations, you went on the listing appointment, right? And on the listing appointment, you give your comparisons, or excuse me, your comparable market analysis, better known as a CMA. You have your listing presentation all dialed in, and you're ready mentally, physically, and emotionally. You show up, you go through the motions, congratulations, you execute the listing agreement, right? Does that mean that the moment that the sellers execute the listing agreement, that you are entitled to a commission? How many people say yes? Yes, because it says that I'm going to get a 6% commission, 5% commission, and half of that is going to the list side, half is going to the cooperating brokerage. And that can be you as a dual agent, or that could be another agent from a Keller Williams office or RE/MAX office, wherever that is, right? It doesn't really matter. The question here is, once you execute the listing agreement, and let's say that the listing agreement is for 6 months, right? And you are getting a full commission of 6 total commission. That means 3% to the list side and 3% to the buy side. Does that entitle you to a commission? How many people say yes? How many people say no? How many people say, I don't know, Simon? So just want to get a feel for that, is that, do you earn a commission based on the execution of the listing agreement? Okay, so put it in the chat, love to hear. Miguel says no, Sue says no. Okay, beautiful. All right, so the answer, Tyler, thank you very much, also says no. Very good. That is correct, 100%. So thank you for contributing. Thank you for acknowledging, and thank you for putting. Thank you, Hope. Absolutely, yes. So the answer is no. You are not entitled to a commission just because you listed the property. There's still a lot of elements, right? A lot of things that need to happen in order for you to earn a commission. Now, let me throw something at you as well. What if you have the listing 30 days in, right? 30 days in, you're doing showings, right? You're doing open houses. You're promoting it on the multiple listing service, getting offers in, presenting these offers to your seller, and the seller is refusing to acknowledge or accept those offers. Please make sure to mute yourself. I hear people in the background. That's Teresa. There we go. So does that entitle you to a commission? Okay. The answer is no. No. Just because you get a ready, willing, and able offer, even if you get a listing that, let's say it's $1 million listing and you get a offer at $1.2 million, no contingencies, all cash, close in 20 days. If the seller says no to that offer, guess what? Can you go after a commission? Well, that's a very good question, right? You have a ready, you have a willing and an able buyer, and you promoted the property, market the property, and you did everything what the listing agreement stipulates, right? And now the buyer all of a sudden, or excuse me, the seller all of a sudden says, no, you know what? I don't want to accept that offer. Are you entitled to a commission? So it really, really depends. So let's go and dive deep into this and get to the meats and potatoes of what this class is about. So let me go to the next. All right, so does the real estate listing agreement meet the requirements for an enforceable listing? Okay, so the California Association of Realtors Form, RLA, meets the legal requirements for an enforceable compensation agreement between the broker, not the listing agent, the broker and a principal, meaning the brokerage, Keller Williams, and the principal, the seller, Mr. or Mrs. Smith. It is in writing and it has a definite termination date, meaning there has to be a beginning date and there has to be an expiration date in order for the elements of this enforceable listing agreement to comply to having a compensation. It contains the mandate negotiability of a commission language, and it is between the brokerage company and the seller, even though it can be signed by a salesperson. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm saying here is that even that you have a listing agreement, what it stipulates right now is it fully enforceable to go after a commission if the seller says no to any offers? And I get that quite often. Am I entitled to a commission? Well, every real estate brokerage has their rules and regulations that are different, okay? I cannot vouch for another brokerage. I can only vouch for what the rules and regulations and our policy says, because that's what we implement here at the office. So the question here, ladies and gentlemen, is it enforceable if you meet all the requirements? And if you do so, then yes, you may have a claim against the seller for due process of going after compensation, okay? But as I stated, there has to be a written agreement. It cannot be verbal. It has to be in writing. It has to have a beginning date and an expiration date. It also has to have the compensation. What is the compensation the seller is willing to pay you, right? Typically, it's to negotiate. Maybe it's friends and family. But at the end of the day, as long as you have all the dots connected, meaning the contract filled out, then yes, there is an avenue that you can go after because it is enforceable to go for a commission, okay? When is the commission earned under the real estate listing agreement? All right, a commission is earned after a seller accepts an offer and the transaction closes, okay? So let's just go through the motions, right? You're the listing agent, you executed the listing agreement, you put the property on the multiple listing service. Now you have offers coming in, showings coming in, open houses coming in and servicing your listing, and all these offers start coming to the table. Well, under the real estate listing agreement, you know, you are entitled to a commission once the deal closes. If you were the one that ultimately closed the transaction and the deal is finalized, recorded, then you are in the position to get a commission, or the brokerages, okay? A seller at the end of the day cannot say last minute, stop, okay, to the escrow company or the escrow officer says, stop, we're not gonna pay the listing agent a commission because the listing agent was not thorough, was not involved, and was not in the seller's best interest. And this is why the listing agent is not entitled to a commission, okay? Well, the contract is very clear, the contract is very defined, and it's very black and white. As long as you perform every element of the agreement, then there's no way that the seller can come back and say no to a commission. We can challenge that. Now, the seller can say whatever the seller wants to say, and we will ultimately go into a mediation. We can ultimately go into an arbitration, or we can ultimately get attorneys involved to demand a commission earned, okay? One of the things, if you don't know already, is we are not paid on the front of the transaction, right? It's not like you get the listing executed and here's my invoice for a $30,000 commission. Doesn't work that way. We are only paid a commission once we earn the commission, and that's at the very end of the transaction. Meaning, you find the buyer, you open escrow, the buyer and the seller go through their due diligence, seller provide all disclosures, all signatures from the buy side and the sell side. The buyer releases contingencies, buyer gets the approval, buyer gets the funding, and then ultimately records, right? And once we hear that sound or see that email, it's officially recorded. That's when you can congratulate yourself, pat yourself in the shoulder or back and say, you did it. That's when you are in the position to earn a commission. Okay. Many brokers believe that locating a buyer who is ready, willing, and able to purchase the property on the terms of the listing is all a listing broker needs to do in order to be compensated, but more is required. The seller must accept the offer from a buyer and the transaction needs to close. So there's two elements right there, ladies and gentlemen. One, the seller must, and I'm going to repeat that, the seller must accept the offer. Okay. As I said earlier, if a seller lists the property for $1 million and the seller gets a $1,200,000 offer, does that entitle the seller to pay the listing brokerage or anyone a commission? Well, it's already telling you that seller must accept the offer, and the seller must also close the deal in order for us to go over and get paid a commission. Okay. Needs to close, a buyer needs to be prevented from doing so. So again, here's the that little cherry on top. Buyer and the prevented from doing so by the seller. So if the seller is interfering, right, with the process in the transaction, then yeah, there's an element that stipulates on the contract that, you know, the buyer and also the listing agent can go after what they want. What? Well, the listing agent can go after a commission and the buyer can go after the property. And that's what we call a specific performance. What is specific performance? Well, it's when the buyer is forcing the sale of the property under the rules and regulations of the contract. And a buyer can unilaterally perform, have a presentation and force the sale of a property. Okay. And is it far and few that happens? Yes, but it can happen where the seller is bound to and press hard to do so. Number two, a commission is earned if the seller withdraws the property from the market. The listing broker also earns a compensation if, without the broker's consent, the seller withdraws the property from the sale or makes it unmarketable. And that's a very key point, word, unmarketable. During the that is a breach triggering commission obligation constructed as an effective withdrawal of the property. Well, let's talk a little bit about that, okay? Because this is very, very good information. And that information is also on the RLA. It's on the residential listing agreement. If you really dive in deep and dissect the contract, you're going to see the language that we are talking about right from the agreement. So this information is pulled from the listing agreement, and it's very black and white, ladies and gentlemen, very black and white. Okay, a commission is earned if the seller withdraws. And let's go dive deep into this conversation. Is everything is peachy and fun, right? Everything is going well with the listing agent, and now the seller decides, well, you know what? I just not going to communicate with the listing agent anymore. I'm not going to communicate or talk or email or text with Simon, who's the listing agent anymore, right? Well, is the seller making it unmarketable or making it very difficult to sell the property? Yeah. What if the seller is not giving us the opportunity, right, to show the property, right? Well, part of the agreement that the agency disclosure says, and it's a very clear and very concise, it says that the seller will make the property accessible to anyone considering or making an offer. So if the seller is making it very difficult, well, that's another element of argument that now you can go after a commission. Now, can we force a seller to do anything? And the answer is no, we cannot. Okay, it's not like we can force the seller. But what we can do is go back to the contract and define and dissect what are the elements of what our position is and how we can earn a commission if we are doing everything in our power to service the client, but the seller and the client is making it very, very difficult. Okay. And these are, again, very good positions to understand. If they're not allowing us to take professional photography, if they're not allowing us to do an open house, if they're not allowing the buyer to do their inspections, right, their physical inspections. Because remember, at the end of the day, buyer has their due diligence period to do any and all inspections and come to a conclusion. Is this the property that they want? Or is this the property that they decided maybe not to go? And the buyer has the right to also ask for a request of repairs. And those three items of request repair can be, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know, we are giving you a list of things that we are asking for you to repair, asking for you to replace, asking you to give us credit, or asking to do a price reduction, right? Now, with that being said, the listing agreement also says that the seller is selling the property in its as-is condition. And where do you find that? That's right off the purchase agreement. There's a section on the RPA that says that the seller's property is being sold in its as-is condition, meaning that even though you may ask for a request for repairs, credit, or price reduction, the seller does not have to acknowledge that or give you a response. The seller can be completely silent for 17 days, right? And not respond to your request. And now you're tossing and turning. It's like, where do we go? Do we go on, or do we stop here and decide that maybe this property is not for us? And the buyer has the right to exit that as well. But in the elements of our position and when a commission is earned under the contract, these are some of the elements that we as real estate professionals can articulate and demand to be paid a commission. And the last part of this presentation, it says continuing refusing to accept full price offers might be construed as an effective withdrawal of the property. Right? Research, doing your homework, and looking at all the comparables, right? And it's very simple. You identify the property within a mile radius, and the last 90 days, you compare properties that are similar in characteristics, meaning square footage, lot size, bedrooms, bathrooms, year built. What are the upgrades the property has endured? And you base it on what other properties and similar characteristics have sold in the last 90 days. And if you don't find anything, then you broaden that you broaden that parameter a little bit more, maybe say 1.5 mile radius. Maybe instead of going 90 days, you'll go 100 or 4 months, and maybe something will pop up where now you can identify property that is close in proximity, similar in characteristics, that now you can use as a comp. Well, right now, if you're aware, it's still a frenzy out there. There's a lot of sellers that are getting multiple offers when they list the property. There's a lot of buyers that are still, with the high interest rates, they're still buying property. So it's great for sellers. It's great for listing agent. So are we going after market share? Now, going back to the commission that you earn, these are, again, some of the elements that a listing agent and the brokerage can go after for damages, meaning, we did everything in our power to service, market, provide, and ultimately give the seller, and now the seller is not giving us what we need in order to close the deal. Now, going back, remember a couple of things that the seller must, because the seller can also argue his and her position and say, well, Simon was just a horrible agent. Simon did not provide me with the necessary documentations to understand the process. And now they can use that against us to say, well, this is the reason I decided to back out of the deal or back out of this contract, and therefore I don't want to proceed with this. Now, there's, again, many segues that can happen. More so, if the property is listed, if the property is in escrow, well, not just you have to answer to our demand, but now you may have the buyer to pressing as well the demand of close, because the buyer sold their property and has to vacate their home in the next week or so. And if the seller is making it very difficult and putting a wall against the listing agents and the agents and the buyer, well, the buyer has also recourses as well to go after for damages as well. The buyer has been damaged because they had every capability by submitting an offer, presenting all personal information, pre-qual letters, bank statements, proof of funds, and ordering the appraisal and spending money on physical inspections, home inspectors, maybe a contractor, and all this costs money. And now the now the seller decides to stop communication or stop the process. Well, you know what? You're impacting, many people from the preceding process of closing this deal. Then we can all go after the seller for, commissions and also for the property itself. So I hope this kind of narrows the question is, when is the commission is earned? Okay, one, seller has to accept the offer. Seller and buyer have to close the deal. That's a given, right? Then there's no question whatsoever that the listing agent, the buyer's agent, the brokerages involved are entitled to a commission once those elements are completed. But now let's talk about, the seller's position of making it very difficult. They're not allowing us to see the property, or the buyer as well. They're not allowing us access to the property. They're not allowing the buyer to do their inspections as well. And even when we present an offer at list or above, the seller is bringing up every excuse. I want more money. I want more money. Well, you signed a listing agreement, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you agree to the terms of that price. And we brought you a ready, willing, and able buyer that is willing to pay you that or then some, meaning more than the list price. So we can anchor that position as a listing agent and say we are entitled to a commission. Now, every transaction is sensitive in itself. There's a lot of intel information that we need to gather to make sure that we're all on the same page. And always bring it to your broker. Bring it to your broker, and the broker should tell you, yeah, we have a very good, legitimate position. I think we could demand a commission, or the broker may say, you know what, it's a waste of time. That sees the value in you and is willing to work and willing to pay you a commission. And again, it's weighing the scale of evidence. The more evidence you have, the better position you're at. The less evidence you have, well, the likelihood that you're going to win this case. And we can escalate it into a mediation. We can escalate it to an arbitration. But even so, the listing agreement, the disclosures, the escrow, and getting cooperations from the people that are involved in this transaction. And then more, what is stopping the seller from allowing the execution of this? So having all that will give us a better position to go after a commission. Any questions? Okay, well, let's go ahead and continue. When this commission is earned still, there's another couple elements to this. Number 3, a commission is earned if the seller cancels the listing in breach. A seller who cancels a listing while the cause is in breach and the full commission is due. The listing broker needs to prove out-of-pocket expenses or damages. Nor is the broker required to continue any efforts under the listing to show that the broker could have performed by procuring a purchaser or a buyer within the listing terms and had not been canceled. Number 4, a commission may be earned after the listing period expires pursuant to the safety clause. The seller may owe compensation to the broker if certain person purchased after the expiration of the listing. The provision is often called a safety clause or a protection clause. However, before the listing broker can claim compensation in these circumstances, several criteria need to be satisfied. All right, so let's break it down a little bit and let's go into the meat and potato of this safety clause, okay? Guess what? There's a lot of agents that I'm really surprised that do not understand those parameters of a safety clause that is right in front of your face. If you look at the listing agreement on the first page, there's a paragraph that allows the agent and the buyer to come to some agreement. Now, the seller may modify that because they're assigning their seal of approval, okay? And if they're not approving the listing agreement, then there's no reason why the seller would execute a listing agreement. This is the negotiations period, okay? The listing agent presents, what they're planning to do to market the property, negotiate, and ultimately give them the highest possible price with the least amount of headaches to net them the most, right? That's typically what we do, is to service our clients. But also with that, the seller also has the right to say, yeah, no, meaning, yeah, there's certain things that I agree with you, Simon, but there's certain things on the contract that I disagree. I want this adjusted. And that can be price, terms, and conditions, okay? And it's a back and forth. It's a tennis, ping pong, back and forth until both the listing agent and the seller come to an agreement. And that could be price, right? Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based on the comparable market analysis that we've done, my presentation and looking at the multiple listing service, my opinion of the home where we should start is $1 million. And the seller may say, well, I disagree. I don't want to list the property for $1 million. I want to list the property for $1.1 million to start. Well, again, if you understand the elements of objection handlers, then you should be able to, come to a position of understanding your client's position, but also understanding why you feel compelled that $1 million is the listing price that we should start. Now, with that being said, folks, I want to also be very clear that even though we're giving what we call an opinion of value, right? It's an opinion. It's not set in stone, okay? Because it's not what my opinion of value is. It's not what the seller's opinion of value is. It's what the buyer is willing to pay at the end of the day. Because let's be honest to ourselves. Let's say we list the property, right, for $2 million, knowing that the property is only worth $1 million. What's going to happen? Well, if someone really, truly desires that property, maybe you'll get one that sticks. But let's be quite frank. Buyers are getting very sophisticated. Buyers are also very knowledgeable. Buyers are researching also and are getting their own thoughts and opinions. But at the end of the day, it's what the buyer is willing to pay for a property. They're the ones that are going to pay the mortgage. They're the ones that are going to be living in the property for 5, 10, 15, 20, or 30 years. So they're the ones that will ultimately make that decision. I'm just putting an opinion. And I'm acknowledging that by giving, comparables to the seller. And the seller either agrees or disagrees with that decision. Because I can tell you this too, folks. I can get 3 licensed professional appraisers to go and evaluate the property, all with the same experience, 10 plus, 15 years plus. Guess what's going to happen? All 3 are probably going to come back with 3 different opinions of value. Okay? So I want you to understand that it's just a number at the end of the day. It's what the buyer is willing to pay for it that makes sense. Why do you think you list the property for $1 million, but you get 20, 30 offers? And now they're going over 200, 300,000 in certain market or in certain areas, I should say. Because supply and demand, right? What the buyer is willing to pay for the location, right? And for a lot of us, the location may be many things. The location may be, I want to be close to the ocean. I want to be close to a beautiful view. I want to see downtown Los Angeles. I want to see the South Bay. I want to see Catalina Island. Or I want to just people watch in front of my house. Or maybe it's the schools. I want to put my kids at a school that helps, an education, whatever that looks like, right? And for a lot of consumers, it is the area in their schools. Okay. And that's why they're willing to pay premium. Okay. Willing to pay premium because they know that this is the area that they truly, truly want to live. Okay. And they're okay paying premium because they're in it for the long haul. Remember, at the end of the day, the way you provide value to your clients is show them the value. Well, Simon, what do you mean by show them the value? The importance of home ownership. Because even if they overpay for a property, right? Even if they pay, in excess of what the appraised value, it's still a good investment. And it's still a great opportunity. Because if they're planning to live there for the long haul or utilize that in the near future as an investment property, then it's a win, because one way or another, the mortgage will be paid off. And once that mortgage is paid off, it doesn't matter what you pay for. Appreciation is going to be there. Substantial equity on the property will be there. And then that's where you leverage yourself or your clients. That's how you need to approach these conversations. Now, I know I go a little off topic, but I just want to be crystal clear in the importance and how all this works. Okay, so going back to this section, commission is earned if the seller cancels the listing in breach, right? A seller who cancels the listing without cause is in breach. Yeah. So if there is no reasonable, right? No reasonable, and what can be reasonable? It really depends. You got two sellers, right? Two sellers, a husband and a wife. God forbid one of the spouses passes away and both did not have a trust or a living, or excuse me, a trust or a will, then it's probably going to be a position where you cannot continue until that is taken care of, either through a probate or elements of, if you do have a trust, that still may delay the process of selling the property. You may need the death certificate, you may need to have a letter of explanation of what transpired, and that's just not going to close, because ultimately two people bought this place, two people are on title, and then two people need to execute the sale of the property. That protects your consumer, that protects all of us that own real estate. Okay. Now let's dive into the second part of what the procuring and the safety, procuring clause and the safety clause that we're talking about. On the first page, right in the middle of the listing agreement, it says the following, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but it says that, you know, you have X blank time frame to provide the seller with a list of people. It's a list of whoever saw the property, whoever submitted an offer, okay, or whoever said anything regarding that property, and that buyer comes back after the cancellation or expiration, and you provide this provision list to the seller prior to the expiration and the cancellation of the listing, then you can go after commission. And this safety clause is a protection for the listing agent and the brokerage. Because in the past, we've had some sellers be very deceive it? No, what was the word I was going to use? Not working out of integrity, okay? Meaning, you know, they ended up finding a buyer and says, look, the listing is about to expire in the next couple of weeks. Let's hang in there. I know you saw the property. I remember you from the open house, or your offer was not considered, you know, but now, you know, the buyer and the seller got in cahoots together, right? And now they want to do a deal outside from paying a real estate commission, you know, because that can be a very substantial amount. And let's cancel. I got another agent that is willing to do it for, you know, a flat fee of $1,000. That's an example, right? Well, if you find out that that buyer who you showed the property, who had came into your open house, or who had submitted an offer, this is why paper trail, folks, is very, very, very important. Because, you know, now you can go back and say, look, X, Y, and Z went and saw the property. X, Y, and Z submitted an offer. X, Y, and Z inquired about the property. And if we can lock in that position of that person seeing, submitting, or even discussion of it, you may be entitled to a commission. And that's where the safety clause, the safety clause comes into play. Okay. Any questions regarding the safety clause? Deceitful, yeah. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. All right, so let's continue. So the number of days after the safety clause must be filled in. So again, folks, if you are not executing the listing agreement very thorough and including all the elements of what that agreement has for you, then you're going to be in a bad position. Meaning, if you do not put a time frame, and it can be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So for me personally, and I go back 25, 26 years when my mentor told me to put 120 days. And that number has just stick with me, 120. So anytime a listing agreement is in play, 120 days. 120 days is what? 4 months, right? 4 months. So that means, ladies and gentlemen, that if you get the listing and the seller decides to cancel or the listing expires, you want to, prior to that happening, provide this list of everyone that has seen the property. Then that gives you that safety clause for 4 months after it expires. So you might be out of the game. It might have been listed now with someone else, and that buyer comes back and buys this property, and you can verify that that's the person that was seeing the property, submitted an offer. You have the right to go after a commission. So how do you protect yourself, and how does the listing agent that takes that listing, because this can happen to you as well, folks. You can be in that position, especially like expired listings. Excuse me, expired listings, you need to be asking those questions. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know that the property was listed about 30 days ago, and you told me that you were unhappy with it. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, please let me know, was there any offers submitted? Yeah, there was 2 offers that were submitted, and you have copies of those offers. Yes, I do have copies of those offers. Okay. Why are we doing this? Because you don't want to be in a position, and the seller doesn't want to be in a position to pay double commission. What we're doing is we're excluding those buyers from the listing, the current listing agent, from paying 2 commissions: the listing, the new listing, and the new brokerage and agent, plus the previous agent as well that was involved in the transaction, because then they're also be entitled to a commission. So I would be asking that, because what's going to happen is, one, the previous company and the agent may get wind of it and may want to go and challenge their procuring cost position, and now go after the seller and also the real estate brokerage, even though we didn't have nothing to do with it. But they're going to say, well, you know what? We had a list. You were supposed to get this list, and the seller failed. So we want to go after, a percentage of your commission as well. And I've seen, ladies and gentlemen, where we have to give, something in order for this to be removed or, settled, basically. So be very, very careful when you're going after listings and sellers that have previously listed the property. Ask those questions. Do you have a list of people that have seen, submitted, or inquired about the property? And if the seller says yes, you want to put that on the listing agreement. These are the buyers that have looked at it. So you have that list in case these buyers come in, right? Then you'll know, shoot, this is the buyer that saw the property. I need to be aware and ultimately be cautious, because again, what can cause here is a dispute, a mediation, a possible arbitration, and then you get entangled in a long, tedious process. We just do not want to be in that position, okay? So going back, the blank line in the paragraph 382 to identify how long after the expiration of the listing period this rule applies must be completed at the time of the listing. If blank, a court would likely construct that the contract did not intend to enforce that provision 100%. The prospecting buyer must be identified in the list of names delivered. The listing broker must provide a list to the seller of the prospecting buyer to be covered by the safety clause. And the list must be given to the seller no later than the date the listing agreement or extension expires. Car form notice of prospecting buyer transfers. Car form NPB may be used for this purpose. The prospecting buyer must have either physically entered or wrote an offer. The prospecting buyer who purchased during the safety period must have either physically entered and been shown the property during the listing period or submitted a signed executed offer during the time. So in essence, these are the parameters that I want you to be very clear, folks, okay? That when you go after, especially an expired listing, you want to protect yourself. But what if you were the listing agent that lost this property because the seller, decided to cancel this, and you were like kind of taken back? 2 months in on a 6-month listing, the seller says, look, I'm just going to take it off the market. We just decided not to sell the property. And then you find out that the listing was closed or it's an escrow. Now we can go after compensation. And if you can find out, and it's happened in the past where a buyer does buy the property and they try to wiggle their way and hustle someone out of a commission. And, the courts will see this as long as you have the paperwork and to identify your position. And it's very, very important that the listing agreement defines that of the time period. Because if you leave it blank, then you're interpreting to the courts that, that's not an enforceable position that I really cared at the time. But if you put a time there, then that can hold water, and now you can go after a commission. And more so, what if the provision is 120 days or 30 days or 90 days? What happens after the following day? Well, that's it. Then there's no recourse to go after a commission. So the sweet spot, in my personal opinion, is about 4 months after it expires or cancels. Now, you can be aggressive and say 6 months. I've seen even a year put on the agreement. But remember, at the end, the seller has a say-so too, and the seller may say no to a year. Okay, so I want to caution you as well that being too aggressive may have some resistance as well. So be very, very, very careful. Okay. Any questions regarding, the safety clause? Cool.
Simon, I have a quick question, Simon.
Yes.
You mentioned the car form NPB.
Mhm.
That basically is a list of offers received. Does it include amounts and contact information for buyers?
What was the acronym again?
I want to say NPB.
MPB. Let's see.
And like Nancy.
Yeah. Do you guys see my screen? Do you guys see my screen with the form?
I
No,
don't see it.
No, you don't see it? Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, share my computer. Let's see. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the NPB, Nancy Paul Boy, okay? The notice of prospecting buyers and transfer. So notice of prospecting buyers. This notice is being provided to you as required by the listing agreement. And it has all the information, seller's information, the brokerage, and the physical address. The listing period, the listing agreement commenced on and was scheduled to expire on or was extended to, so that'll be the expiration. The list of prospecting buyers. So here you're going to provide the list. Now, if you had 20 people, you can include additional forms, right? Or you can include an addendum to this and include the names, the brokerage, the agents, and when those offers were those offers were submitted. Or if you have like a registry, right, when you're doing an open house, or even your lockbox. You know, if you use a Supra, it keeps a register stamp of any agent that went in there, right? Now, the only problem with that is we don't know who the buyer is. Because now, what if that buyer who submitted the offer, that buyer went and saw the property, but we never got an offer, but they come back and buy the property. Well, it's going to be very difficult to really, try to challenge that. But if there's a way and an avenue that by maybe an email that was sent, maybe you can be very proactive and say, please provide me with the buyer's name, right, as part of the appointment. Just so that way you have transparency, and now you can add the agent and the brokerage and also who their buyer and client was. And now you can provide this list to the seller. Now, I also want to show you the listing agreement to the RLA. Okay. And what I was referring to is the section on the first page of the listing agreement. You guys see my
Yes.
okay, thank you. All right, so this is the section that I'm referring to right here, folks. Is this section here, section 3(2). See that? That's where you want to put this information. So let's read what the following says. If within blank calendar days, A, after the end of the listing period or any extension, or B, after any cancellation of this agreement unless otherwise agreed, seller enters into a contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to anyone, and they're saying prospective buyer, right? That list of people, or that person related entity, I, who physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period or any extension. What does that extension mean? It means that, let's say you have a 6-month listing, right? And then the seller and the agent yourself says, look, whatever happened. I know we're getting close to the listing expiring. I just need another 30, 40 days more. I think I have a buyer. Can you extend the listing for another 30 days? And if the seller says, yes, we can, then you're going to utilize the form MT. M is in Mary, T is in Tom. MT, which stands for modification of terms. The modification of terms allows you to extend the listing. It's not like you've got to redo a new listing agreement and spread the dates longer. No, it doesn't work that way. It's just a modification of terms. All you got to do is just one pager saying we're going to extend it till this date, and that covers you, okay? But this language right here, folks, is very, very, very important, because if you leave this blank, then you don't have any leg to stand. I want to be very clear on this. Put a number there, okay? It could be 30 days if you want. It can be 90 days. It could be whatever you want. Remember, at the end of the day, the seller has to execute this, right? Initial here, sign, before it's executed. The other thing that I want to make sure you're clear on is the commission, all right? If the commission is going to be a total of 6%, you're going to put here, right? So, or if it's going to be a flat fee, then you're going to put here if it's going to be a flat fee. Either or is perfectly fine, okay? So either it's a flat fee or a percentage, okay? Flat fee or percentage that you're going to put here. Now, the other thing I want you to understand too is section D as in David, all right? Do not leave this blank if your position is to put it on the multiple listing service. So what it says is the following. Seller has been advised of broker's policy regarding cooperation with and the amount of compensation offered to other brokers. 1, broker is authorized to cooperate with any compensation broker participates through the multiple listing service or services, better known as the MLS, by offering the MLS broker out of broker's compensation, okay, broker's compensation, which means this up here, right? Specified on section 3, either a percentage, and that percentage is what you're willing to pay the cooperating brokerage. Is a willing and able buyer, and that's typically would be 3%, or it can be a flat percent as well. Okay, maybe we want to just give the buyer's agent $15,000. Okay, either a percentage or a flat fee. Okay, any questions regarding these parameters here? Make sure that you include this, because if you don't and you leave this blank, okay, let's just say you leave this blank, right? And you put it on the multiple listing service, the interpretation that the seller may argue here is, well, you didn't disclose how much you were going to compensate the buyer's broker's company. Therefore, that 6%, I want you to give them 5. All right. And because you did not emphasize that on the listing agreement, then you're putting yourself in a very not so good predicament. Okay. So I want to stress that, put the percentage. Typically it's 50% of the listing commission. Okay. And again, each real estate company and listing agent can negotiate all this. Okay. This is not set in stone, but it's a position of, propelling your role and responsibility to list and sell their home. Okay. Any questions regarding the language there? Okay. There's something else I wanted to also include, and I believe it's at the very end of this agreement. Let me find it. Okay, section paragraph 20, where it says management approval. Okay, a lot of real estate agents who list properties don't even know that this language, even though it's in black and white, does not know that this is part of the agreement. So what it says on the listing agreement, folks, is very simple. It says management approval. If an associate license, meaning associate broker or salesperson in a broker's office, Keller Williams, salesperson or broker associate, it defines it very clear, folks, enters into this agreement on broker's behalf, meaning you enter into a listing agreement and you're only willing to compensate, $5 as an example, or take the listing for $1 as an example. Okay, I know I'm being a little funny, but I'm just trying to prove my point here. What it says, the broker's behalf, the broker or the manager does not approve of its terms. Okay, because the broker at the end of the day or the office has to approve everything that a salesperson or broker associate is doing for the safe haven of the process, and making sure that we are all in compliance, right? But it says, manager does not approve of its terms, broker or manager has the right to cancel this agreement within 5 days after execution, okay? Meaning that you get the listing, the broker gets a copy of this, we can disagree with you and say, look, Simon, I know you got this listing for $2 million, but you're only compensating, $1,000. What's the reason? We want to know the story behind your position. Oh, it's because I wanna retain the $200,000 commission and only give the buyer because it's a hot market. Well, unfortunately, based on this verbiage, the manager approves, the broker approves this and basically says yes to the terms of the agreement, or can say, no, look, we got to play fair in this. Flip the tables around. What if you were the buyer submitting an offer on this and you were only getting, a flat fee? I don't think it's fair. You worked as hard as the listing agent. I think we need to revise that. Okay. I get your point, Simon. I'll go ahead and modify that. Okay, so that's what I, want you to also understand, that just because you get the listing doesn't mean necessarily that it's within the standards of the broker manager approval. Okay, any questions?
Well, that
All
was
right,
really
team.
good. I like that
Oh,
one.
awesome. Thank you, Teresa.
I was,
I really
yeah, I was
appreciate
like,
it.
oh, I forgot that because when I did a listing presentation and this client insists on like low 3%, the whole transaction for the buyer and the seller. He just wants to play a 3% for both sides. And me and Leroy Brown says, no, that's not approved by our, broker, Keller Williams. We can't even pass that, let alone, it was just crazy.
Right. Absolutely. And sometimes it's just going back to the elements of not knowing, right? And that happens, or we forgot, gosh, it's been a while. Thank you so much. It just brings perspective back to the conversation. All I'm trying to do is protect you and protect your clients and ultimately your commission. And there's ways to do this because I hear it all the time. The seller canceled on me. Well, did you have an executed listing agreement? Well, no. Am I entitled to go after a commission? Well, no. There's certain things that need to happen, ladies and gentlemen. But at the end of the day, if you're in my office or in office with your broker, then by all means, please reach out to your prospective brokers and ask the questions. This is, again, just a disclaimer. I'm just providing you, straight from the California Association of Realtors, the do's and don'ts. And it's a valuable, but it also gives you an understanding, right? Because at the end of the day, I want you to get paid. I want you to get your full share of your commission. But we got to also follow the rules in the regulations, right? Regarding the proper documentation to protect you and also your client. So with that being said, I appreciate you. I know I went 10 minutes over my time, but I hope that this information was of value. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to address any of your concerns. Okay. Thank you all. Have a phenomenal afternoon. Be safe. And I'll see you on our next contract class. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you.